Today I'm officially kicking off spooky season on this channel with a preview of the 31 Days of Horror Challenge that I'm going to be taking during the month of October. I'll go into all the details of what I'm going to be doing with this challenge in case any of you would like to join me. And then I'm also going to be doing a ranking of my top 10 favorite horror franchises of all time. So let's rock this bad boy. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz. So with spooky season upon us here, I wanted to chat with you guys for a few about what I'm going to be doing with this channel during the month of October, as well as invite you guys to play along at home if you're feeling so inclined and if you happen to be a big fan of the horror genre like me, and especially if you happen to be a little new to the horror genre, say, I don't know, in the last few years or so, also like me. Like so many other horror fans often do around this time of year, I've decided that I'm going to be taking my own 31 Days of Horror Challenge, where I'm going to essentially try and watch as many horror films as I possibly can in the month of October. And I'm going to chronicle my progress on this challenge on a weekly basis throughout the month here on the channel. Now, this is not necessarily intended to be any kind of a community challenge or anything like that. It's something I'm really just doing for myself, for fun, for my own personal amusement and entertainment value. It's really just intended to be kind of a casual challenge. I've always loved setting little goals for myself or doing challenges or making little lists or whatnot with the films I watch or the titles I choose to collect on physical media. So I've always enjoyed geeking out on this stuff. I mean, what can I say? I'm a geek. Guilty as charged. But this is the first year I've had my own YouTube channel, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to bring you guys along for the ride and informally invite any of you who are interested in participating to do so in whatever way works best for you. And I will be going over the challenge guidelines and my own personal goals here in just a minute. Also, just a quick programming note here. I want to let you guys know that I am going to be leaning into the horror content on this channel a lot more than usual during the month of October. Because I'm getting all pumped up about 31 Days of Horror and the idea that I get to engage in a month-long horror-thon where I'm pretty much going to be watching nothing but horror films for the entire month. Now, before I get into the challenge parameters and the goals I'm setting for myself, I wanted to give you guys a brief idea of where I'm coming from with the horror genre and what's led me to decide to embark on this challenge now. Now, I've talked about this before, but it's worth bringing up again for anybody who's new here. I was a late bloomer to the horror genre. I didn't really get into horror until just a few years ago. For most of my adult life, I just was never really into the genre. Even though I was around when many of these films that we now consider to be total horror classics first came out. Horror just wasn't my thing back then. Now, of course, there were always exceptions. I've always been a big Halloween fan. I love John Carpenter. I've always been a big Dawn of the Dead fan. So it's not like I never got into horror at all prior to a few years ago. I just wasn't into it that much. Every once in a while, I'd get on a kick where I'd take a very casual interest in the genre and maybe watch a few horror films over the course of a few days or a week or maybe a couple weeks. I'd go on a little horror kick, but it was always very short-lived. And I can probably count on one hand the number of times that actually happened in my adult life. I just was never really into horror overall, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time outside of those little spurts. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time watching horror up until a few years ago. But the funny thing is, I ultimately ended up doing a total 180 and becoming a huge horror fan within a very short period of time. I don't even know exactly how it happened, to be honest. Something inside my brain must have just clicked. And my perspective on the horror genre changed dramatically over the course of about 6 months, which frankly felt like overnight, really. In fact, I feel like my tastes in movies in general just kind of radically changed overnight. I went from being someone who preferred long, drawn-out, epic movies that I could analyze and overthink to the moon, on the one hand, to, on the other hand, being someone who preferred tight, concise, kick-ass 90-minute horror and action flicks where I can get in and out quickly and just be entertained and have a great time. And ever since that change took place in me, I've been all in on the horror genre. But of course, being so new to the genre, I've also had a hell of a lot of catching up to do. And I think I've done a pretty good job getting myself up to speed in the last few years. But I'm also acutely aware that the horror genre is so vast and so expansive that there are still a lot of gaps in my own personal knowledge of horror films. So that's something I'm always looking to rectify wherever possible. Now, I bring up my own personal history with horror for one key reason, and that is to suggest this. I have to assume that there are new horror fans entering the horror realm, entering the horror market all the time, every day. I mean, we're not all seasoned pros and horror veterans here, right? And that's precisely where a challenge like this can come in very handy. So if you happen to be new to the horror genre, you might just be in the right place here, because there are definitely some benefits to doing a challenge like this. When you're new to the genre, it can be really fun and exciting doing a challenge like this, not only because you get to see a bunch of cool horror films that you've never seen before, but also because doing a month-long horror-thon like this is much more likely to increase your horror vocabulary at an exponential rate. You can essentially get yourself up to speed in a much shorter period of time. And just so you guys know, this is only the second time for me doing this challenge myself. I did it for the first time in my whole life last year, and I had so much fun with it that I knew going into spooky season this year that I wanted to do it again. Another benefit is that when you're doing the challenge like this, kind of out in the open on social media like this, it really gives us the chance to share ideas with each other about what to watch throughout the month. It gives us a chance to discover some great little gems from each other that we may not have known about. I know I get a lot of great ideas myself just from watching other people's videos out there, and certainly from watching some of the dedicated horror channels on YouTube. Okay, getting into the actual challenge parameters here, and honestly, this is actually a pretty simple challenge. There's not a lot to it. There's just a couple key guidelines here that I personally follow. The idea is to watch at least 31 movies in 31 days, or an average of one per day. Now, the key portion of what I just said there are the words "at least," because the idea is really to watch as many horror films during the month as you possibly can. Now, personally, I have two different goals that I actually set for myself. The first goal is that baseline minimum that I expect to be able to reach. But then I also added an additional upper level goal for myself personally that's based on how many films I was actually able to watch last year when I did this challenge. So in my case, the minimum goal that I'm hoping to accomplish, and frankly expect to be able to far surpass, is that 31 movies in 31 days. But I also know I can do more than that, because last year when I did this challenge, I was able to squeeze in about 50 movies within the 31 days. So my personal upper goal is to at least meet or surpass 50 films. But if you're just doing this for the first time, you can just stick with the one goal. You don't necessarily need to make it any more complex than that. So essentially the name of the game here is setting a minimum goal for myself that I think I can realistically reach, and then taking it a step further and seeing just how far beyond that minimum goal I can get during the month of October. It's just a fun little numbers game I like to play, wrapped up in all kinds of delectable horror goodness. Now, of course, your goals don't have to be the same as mine, right? I set that 31 in 31 days as a baseline, but you don't have to do that. If you're a horror veteran, you might want to double that number and do like 62 in the course of 31 days. I think you should set your baseline goal to whatever you think you can realistically accomplish. Everybody's lives are different. People have different schedules and time constraints and family considerations and whatnot. So if this is your first time doing something like this, I recommend just setting a minimum goal for yourself that you're comfortable with and that works best with your life. And then see how far beyond that minimum goal you're able to get. The idea is to immerse myself in horror for the entire month and watch nothing but horror for the entire month. Now, as far as what kind of films I'm watching during the month, I don't really plan out all the films I'm going to watch or anything like that. I just kind of wing it and just watch whatever I'm in the mood for on any given day, as long as it's within the horror genre, of course. Going into a challenge like this, there may be certain films that I definitely want to make sure I work in throughout the month. For example, in my case, I'm looking to rewatch all of the older Dario Argento films from the first 20 years of his career. I also want to revisit my Romero Living Dead films. I go up through about Land of the Dead, and that's about where I stop with Romero's films. So I may have certain films that I plan to watch at some point during the month, but I don't like plan it all out and try and do a rigid schedule or anything like that. To keep things interesting and lively, I personally like to watch a fairly even balance between horror films I already know and love versus horror films that are new to me and I've never seen, whether they're older films or more contemporary films. So I try to aim for about a 50-50 split between the familiar and the unfamiliar when I'm doing this challenge. Of course, my personal favorite decades for horror are the 70s and the 80s. So when I'm looking for new movies to watch, I often will look back in time and try and find a bunch of hidden gems from the 70s and 80s that maybe I've never seen before. But I also watch some more contemporary films as well, so it's not all old school horror. I just tend to not watch as many contemporary films as I do old school horror. And I do the 50-50 split between the familiar and the unfamiliar because I want to make sure that I'm significantly expanding my knowledge of horror throughout the month. But at the same time, I also don't want to get burned out on only watching new films that I don't give my favorites or the classics enough love throughout the month. So I personally find that a good balance between familiar and unfamiliar is key for me. And those are really the only guidelines for the challenge itself. Like I said, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot to it. It's basically just a month-long horror-thon that you set up in whatever way works best for you. Now, as far as how I'm going to chronicle my progress on this challenge, I will be posting weekly video updates every Wednesday in October, starting on October 4th, and then ending on the day after Halloween with my final challenge wrap-up video on November 1st. Now, that first update on October 4th, that's only going to include a few days worth of film watching time, so I'll probably pair that particular video up with like a ranking list of some kind, or maybe just some other horror recommendations for you guys on physical media. And what I'll be doing with these weekly updates is going over all the horror movies that I've watched since the previous update, or in the case of October 4th, since the beginning of the month. And then with each update, I'll also keep a running tally of how many films I've watched so far relative to how far along I am in the month, as well as assess whether I'm on track to meet or surpass my own personal goals. Now, as far as your participation goes, when I do these weekly update videos, those of you who are participating in this challenge can do one of a couple different things. You can either leave me a comment in the update videos that I do on my channel, chronicling your own progress and let me know what kind of films you've been watching over the course of the week. Or if you happen to have your own YouTube channel and are doing your own progress update videos and whatnot, by all means, feel free to tag me in any videos you do on this challenge, and I absolutely will watch them. Like I said, I'm always on the lookout for new ideas and hidden horror gems myself. So I very much appreciate your guys' videos as well, and being able to see what you're all watching out there. Now, just briefly, before I move on here, I did want to say something about the streaming services, specifically as it relates to this challenge. Now, of course, you guys know this is a physical media channel, so when I'm doing these weekly updates, I will naturally try to display physical media copies of whatever I'm watching wherever possible, provided I actually own them in my collection. Now, the way I see it is, overall, I am not the biggest fan of streaming at all. But doing a challenge like this is one situation where I do think utilizing the streaming services can be extremely beneficial, especially if you're trying to take in a large volume of new horror titles that you've never seen within a short time frame, not knowing whether you'll like them or not. Doing a challenge like this gives me the chance to preview a lot of horror movies I've never seen via streaming to find out which ones I actually want to own. Because let's be real, I don't necessarily want to own every horror movie I watch. I'm not necessarily into every horror movie I watch. I'm very much into curating my horror collection to suit my own tastes. And even though I don't really like streaming very much at all compared to the physical media experience, this is one situation where I do think streaming can be very helpful for weeding out any potentially disastrous future blind buys. And honestly, it's worked out really well for me so far, since there have been movies that I thought I was going to like a lot more than I actually did, and streaming them first actually saved me quite a bit of money. On the flip side, there were also a number of horror movies I watched last year during this challenge for the first time via streaming that I ended up buying on disc throughout the year so that I could have the physical media experience with those titles once I returned to them this year. So I would encourage people to utilize the streaming services to augment their overall 31 Days of Horror Challenge experience. And if you're looking for a recommendation on a good streaming service for horror content, the main one I use is Shudder. They have a great selection of movies. And now I'm an Amazon Prime member, so I actually subscribe to Shudder through my Amazon Prime account. It's only like $6 or $7 a month, and you get, for what you get and the selection of titles you get, it's a really good deal. And I also subscribe to Arrow Video's streaming service, which is a fairly decent service. I mean, they've got a great selection, but sometimes it can be a little iffy playing a few of the titles. Sometimes certain titles will time out on you indefinitely, and you won't be able to get them to play. It hasn't happened with very many titles that I've tried to watch through the Arrow streaming service, but it's probably happened with about 4 or 5 movies that I actually really wanted to watch and preview to see if I wanted to buy them, and I couldn't get them to play on Arrow's service. But most of the time, I'm usually able to play most things that I encounter on their streaming service. And their service is also really affordable. I think it's only about $7 a month or something like that. So, but they also have a lot of parity with, there's a lot of duplication between what's on Arrow Video streaming service and what's on Shudder. Sometimes you'll find things that are on Arrow's service on Shudder. So, but Shudder's the big one I like. And of course, you're going to find horror movies on, even just Prime Video will have their own selection of movies. Also, HBO, or I guess it's called Max now, but HBO is going to have some horror stuff that you might want to check out. But yeah, Shudder's really the best value, I think, as far as streaming services go. And I do find that I use it quite a bit during the month of October. Now, beyond the challenge itself, and in addition to the weekly updates, I just wanted to reiterate that I am also going to be doing a lot of other horror-related content throughout the month. I've got a number of ranking videos planned, including like a Dario Argento ranking. I'll be doing a Halloween franchise ranking. I've also got a Phantasm tribute and ranking that I'm going to be doing, and some other things as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun this spooky season. So I hope you'll keep coming back and stay tuned to the channel for it. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell as well so you can be alerted when I'm posting really cool videos that you might dig. And also don't forget to like the videos as well. It really helps with the channel's profile and visibility out there. So thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, I wanted to move on next to a horror franchise ranking. And some of you who are horror veterans out there, you might get a real kick out of this because of my relative newness to the genre just in the last few years. I wanted to have a record of my favorite horror franchises at this point in time so that I can compare my preferences now to what they look like a year from now or 2 years from now when I'm doing this challenge, or 5 years from now. I'm very curious to see how my preferences on favorite horror franchises evolve over time the more sequels I get a chance to actually watch. And I say this because I want you guys to keep in mind that I haven't necessarily seen every sequel in every franchise that I'm ranking here today. So my ranking here is going to be largely based on the strength of my favorite entries in any given franchise, not necessarily based on the strength of the franchise as a whole. Meaning some of the franchises on this list may only have a couple decent films in the entire franchise. But I like those films so much that it warranted putting the entire franchise on the list. By the way, if you're wondering what qualifies as a franchise in my mind, it's anything with 3 or more entries. Now, I am going to breeze through these a lot more quickly than I usually do with most of my list videos because this video is already getting pretty damn long as it is. And I just really want to kind of give you an idea of where I come out on these horror franchises. I'll save the in-depth details for some of the other videos that I do later on. For today, though, I'm just going to let you know what my favorites are real quick. Like I said, just so I have a record, a snapshot, if you will, of my particular preferences at this point in time. Okay, so let's do this. Coming in at number 10, and I'm not sure if this even totally qualifies as a horror franchise or not, but I love the Resident Evil movies. I think they're a lot of fun. There are definitely some strong horror elements in them. Here, maybe this would be helpful. But no, there's definitely some strong horror elements in these movies, but I just don't know how much longtime horror fans would consider this to be a strictly horror franchise. There's definitely lots of action and sci-fi elements in this as well. But for this list, I'm going to go ahead and consider this horror. So that's my number 10. Number 9. Oh, I know someone's going to trip out that I put this as low as I do on my list, but number 9 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with these two entries being the ones that are primarily responsible for this franchise being on this list. Now, I've said this before, I do like both of these films. I think I've seen almost all of the other franchise entries as well at one point or another, but really it's just these two that I really like. These two are my favorites. Of course, the classic is the classic, but if I'm being honest, I've actually always liked the second one more than the first. Yeah, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise comes in at my number 9. Next up at number 8 would be the Omen franchise, and I'm really just focusing on this trilogy. I'm not talking about the remake or anything like that. I actually really like this trilogy. I like all 3 of them. So yeah, number 8 for me is the Omen. Classic stuff with some great performances. At number 7, and this is another one that I'm not sure how much it's actually considered horror. I consider it horror, and I'm also going to kind of cheat a little bit on the franchise because I'm not sure what exactly is considered canon in the franchise and what's not. But I absolutely love Cronenberg's Scanners, and I haven't seen the direct sequels to this, the second and third one, I think. I haven't seen those at all, but I absolutely love this film, and I love the Scanner Cop series. These are great. Scanner Cop 1 and Scanner Cop 2, which I do consider this to be kind of a spiritual sequel to the original Scanners, and it's probably, I don't know if it was intended to be or what, but I've always thought of these as just a perfect fit with Cronenberg's original Scanners movie. Okay, and at number 6 for me, I chose the Exorcist franchise. Now, I'll be straight up honest with you on this. The reason this franchise is on the list is because of the first and the third film. I don't care about the films or anything else that was done in this franchise. It's really just the first and the third film that are responsible for this one being on the list. And I'm sorry about the reflection there on the steelbook. I didn't want to take the cover off. But yeah, Exorcist, I mean, all-time classic, one of the greatest horror movies ever, right? So yeah, I had to do it. And then getting into my personal top 5 is Nightmare on Elm Street. I do like this one. You know, not all the entries are that great, but you know, I always have fun with it. And yeah, so good stuff. Nightmare on Elm Street. You guys all know what this is. It's one we definitely need in 4K. Am I right? I mean, long overdue. So hopefully we'll be getting a 4K of these films in the next year or so. Well, they've got the 40th anniversary next year, so I'm sure the first film will be released in 4K. But I'm really hoping they release all of them in 4K and do a nice proper box set for the Nightmare on Elm Street series in 4K. But this franchise is just a lot of fun. I love it. So yeah, number 5, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise for me. Number 4 would be George Romero's Living Dead franchise. Now, I only go up to about Land of the Dead with these movies. You know, I'm not necessarily into, I haven't seen the 2 that he did after that. I've heard they're terrible, so I've never bothered with them. But Land of the Dead, I still like Land of the Dead. It's decent. It's not as good as the previous 3. But yeah, the Living Dead franchise, absolutely love Romero's films and his work. So Living Dead. Okay, and for my top 3, Phantasm. Absolutely love Phantasm, as I'm going to be talking about in a tribute video coming up soon. Yeah, this was kind of a gateway to horror for me. I've said that before, but it's so true. I just have a real strong affinity for this franchise and for the characters in these films. So yeah, love Phantasm. Number 3. Number 2 for me is the Halloween franchise. Absolutely love the Halloween franchise. And if it weren't for my number 1, this franchise would be my favorite horror franchise. So yeah, Halloween at number 2. And then number 1 is Alien, the Alien franchise. And it's really based on the strength of the first 2 films. Although, you know, you can make a case that really Aliens, the second one, it really isn't. I don't know how much we would consider that horror. It's really more of a sci-fi action. But I think you can make the case that the third and fourth movies definitely had horror elements to them. And certainly the original is just a sci-fi horror classic. So the first 2 films in this franchise are among my favorite films of all time. So, you know, if I didn't include the sci-fi horror element, then Halloween would be it, right? That's my favorite of the big 3. Of the big 3 horror franchises, this is my favorite. But my absolute favorite are the Alien movies. So if I'm counting these have to go at number 1. So absolutely love those. Now I do also have a few quick honorable mentions as well, just like 3 or 4 here. The first one would be, of course, Jaws. Yeah, I know a lot of people would probably have this in their top 10. I like Jaws, but I just don't like it quite as much as others do. But I do like the sequels. I like both 2 and 3. So, you know, yeah, fun stuff. Jaws is what it is. I mean, we all know what that is, right? Also wanted to mention the Conjuring franchise. Really good contemporary horror franchise that I absolutely love. I even like the third one. You know, a lot of people kind of shit on that one, but I didn't think it was too bad. So I enjoy this one. And then here it comes, guys. For those of you who are tripping out that I didn't include this in my top 10 list, here's Friday the 13th, getting the honorable mention. Frankly, I have never thought this franchise was that great. I mean, I definitely prefer the Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises a lot more than this. This is still fun. It's fun to watch these films. My favorite is the third one. Well, actually, the third and the fourth one are my favorites, but most of the others, I can kind of take it or leave it. So I'll put them in honorable mentions for you guys, but really, I've never been, you know, that excited about Friday the 13th. I've always thought it was kind of overrated as far as horror goes. And then my final honorable mention, and I'm not sure if this counts as horror or not, it's vampires, so I guess it does. I love the Blade movies. Blade trilogy is great. I do have the first one on 4K, and I would love to see them release 2 and 3 on 4K as well. So we'll see if that happens at some point. But yeah, absolutely love the Blade trilogy. So that about wraps it up for not only my horror franchise ranking list, but my 31 Days of Horror Challenge preview. So let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback. You guys know I really enjoy talking to you in the comments. So when you guys leave comments, I do try to respond, as long as you're not being a dick. If you're a dick, I might be a dick back or just not respond and ignore you. So as long as you're cool and respectful and everything, then we shouldn't have any problems. But yeah, let me know if you're interested in taking this challenge. Have you done this type of challenge before? And if so, how did it go? I'd love to chat with you guys about all things horror here. So like I said, feel free to leave your thoughts, feedback, any questions or whatnot in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget to subscribe, like the videos, all that good stuff. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you soon.